My name is Mike Hockley. I'm the co-chair of the Public Policy and Advocacy Committee for the Overland Park Chamber of Commerce. I want to welcome the audience, such as you are, and those of you who are viewing this online. First of all, before we get started, I want to thank the Johnson County Public Policy Council for coordinating today's forum. The council is a collaborative effort of the 10 chambers throughout the area, and each chamber is hosting these candidate forums for candidates who are running in districts where the chambers are located. So in addition to hosting forums like this, the Public Policy Council conducts other voter education efforts, including publishing a whole host of candidate information on the council's website. And you can go to that website at www.votejoco.com. That's www.votejoco.com. I want to welcome our candidates today. On my far left is Ed Roitz. Ed worked for nearly 4 decades in his family business that included numerous small stores and gas stations. He served 1 term in the Kansas Senate before turning his focus to local government and serving as city commissioner and mayor of Pittsburgh, Kansas, before he moved up to the Johnson County area. Linda Featherston currently represents the residents in the 16th District in the Kansas House after having been elected for the first time in 2020. For more than 30 years, she has owned and operated a successful piano studio and serves on numerous community organizations and boards. So today, each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Then after the opening comments, we'll rotate through questions that were written by the Public Policy Council, and we'll get through as many questions as time allows, but we'll cut this off at about an hour. Candidates will have up to 2 minutes to answer each question, and we will not be taking questions from the audience today. Because this is a forum and not a debate, we will not have built-in time for rebuttal. At the conclusion of the Q&A, we'll give each candidate 1 minute for closing remarks. So you get 2 minutes to open, 2 minutes for each of your questions, and 1 minute to close. Now, prior to starting the forum, we drew a number to determine who would speak first. Based on that random drawing, we'll begin with Ed Roitz and his opening statement. We'll then call on Linda after that, and then we'll alternate back and forth as to who answers each question first. So, Ed, it's your turn.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank the Overland Park Chamber of Commerce and the various suburban chambers for sponsoring this event today. I want to thank my opponent, Linda, for agreeing to be on the podium for the stand with us. It's been a pleasure running, challenging for the 16th District State Representative seat. It's been a lot of fun and a lot of work. Walking the district and walking all the various neighborhoods that comprise the 16th District from north to south, east to west. I've heard a lot of comments and on property taxes, the drug situation with fentanyl, but I think the most common comment that I receive is on the inflation that we are all experiencing right now, whether that be at the gas pump or at the grocery store. And it's, I think, because of a lot of the national policies that are in place that are have a lot to do with causing this, why it's hard to figure out what Washington's really doing. Kansas has a very rich history to work on and to build on, but however, what we're experiencing right now is that amongst all states, we are a border state, and we're located right on I-35, which is a natural conduit, surface transportation conduit for a lot of the cartel drugs and fentanyl that's hitting Johnson County. And it's become one of the largest sources of death in America, and Johnson County has not been immune.
All right, thank you, Ed. Linda?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you to the Public Policy Council for hosting us today. Thank you, Ed, for being here. As Mike said, I'm Representative Linda Featherston. I serve the 16th District, which goes from the mall to the community college, now down to the Edwards campus, and we represent parts of the Shawnee Mission, Olathe, and Blue Valley school boards. We're the only district in the county that's privileged to represent all of our big school districts. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, a piano teacher, and I have run my small business from top to bottom for 30 years. I put my husband through school twice while raising toddlers through that business. So I'm an active community volunteer. I served with Girl Scouts for over a decade. I'm a longtime volunteer at a church, and I volunteered at my children's schools from the day they entered until the day they exited, which is the blessing you get when your kids are in music and the arts. They always need somebody to help out. I continue to volunteer in the WIC garden, where we serve those who have food insecurities, and I'm on several music boards. During my time in office, I've been an advocate for public schools and children. I voted for fully funding our schools, including special education. I voted against the open borders policies and other attempts by the legislature to interfere in our award-winning Johnson County schools. I did co-sponsor the food tax bill, and I'm sorry it fell victim to politics. On the business side, I voted for responsible budgets that have led to record low unemployment, record investment in the state, and record surpluses. I voted for infrastructure improvements, and I voted for the Panasonic agreements once I received assurances that tax dollars would be protected if things didn't work out. I introduced bipartisan legislation to increase protections for hospital workers, and I'm using those relationships I've formed on that bill to work further on my bill to increase protections for domestic abuse victims, and that includes getting guns out of the hands of convicted domestic abusers. I'm a piano teacher, not a politician, and I've really been honored to serve the district in this capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, since Ed went first with the presentations, the first question will go to you, Linda.
Okay.
As a candidate, what are your top 3 policy issues?
So my top policy, which anybody who's seen me at the door would know, it's always our schools. Schools are the backbone of our economy. They're the backbone of our society. That's how we get a productive and competitive labor force. We're so lucky to host the 3 school districts that we get to have input from all 3 of those, which are fairly diverse districts, although we're still in Johnson County. Having the community college in the district, we get the technical side of things, and then, I haven't heard from the Edwards campus since they're new to the district, but I certainly do hear from my alma mater, Kansas State, and other colleges. My number 2 policy would be maintaining our responsible budgets. We need to have that well-balanced 3-legged stool we all hear about, so no portion of the tax base is unduly or unfairly burdened. And then the third thing would be common sense gun laws. I hear time and time again at the door that people have had enough. They're tired of feeling like their children aren't safe at school. They think it is completely unreasonable that domestic abusers still have access to weapons, despite that being illegal in Kansas. They're in favor of background checks. My responsible gun owners don't like being made to look bad by irresponsible gun owners. And I think we can all come together on common sense solution that respects the Second Amendment and everybody's right to own a gun while keeping Kansas families safer.
Okay. And if either of you want me to repeat a question, just ask and I'll repeat the question. But Ed, I'll repeat this question. As a candidate, what are your top 3 policy issues?
Very good. Well, number 1 is the economic question of inflation and the increased price of gasoline, diesel fuel, and groceries. And it doesn't take very long to realize what what has happened to prices in the last couple of years. We're paying probably about double for a gallon of gas, a gallon of diesel fuel, and virtually everything in any store is increased dramatically in price. The inflation is racking every family with financial havoc. Number 2, safe streets. I want to say that I support law enforcement, and with the rise in crime, the perception of a lot of folks in Overland Park is that our community is not as safe as it should be and what it used to be. And I want to again voice my support for first responders and our law enforcement officials. Third is strong schools. Do believe in the fully funded, the massive increases in funding due to court order in recent years. But also, I think not only it's not how much money is spent, but how it's spent and where it's spent. And I want to concentrate and do more to focus on classroom funding, and so that, you know, teachers don't have to scrounge for school supplies at the start of the year. And I want to focus on kids over the institutions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this question will go to you first, Ed. What are your views on state tax policy? And be as specific as you can.
Well, what I would say is statistically, Kansas is one of the worst states for retirees, and that's according to Kiplinger in 2022. There's a number of things that we can do, or at least consider, to relieve seniors and to hopefully keep them here and not to lose them to other states. The income tax for retired seniors, we could look to eliminate or certainly reduce it. Also, I think that Kansas is one of the few states that taxes Social Security benefits, and I would like to eliminate that on our senior citizen residents. Overland Park's a great place to live, and a lot of people have lived and worked and raised their families here and don't want to be forced out of Kansas or out of Overland Park because of high taxes. I would I would support the total elimination of sales tax on food, and I would say completely and as soon as possible.
All right, thank you, Ed. Linda?
Thank you. I support the responsible budgets that we have had since Governor Kelly took over. I certainly respect that the previous governor won his election, was allowed to try his experiment, and I think we found that that experiment failed. So I'd like to make sure we continue forward with a well-rounded balance between property income and sales tax. That's a plan that works well and has served us well. Regarding property tax, I do support reinstituting the ad valorem fund. So that's in the Constitution that the state sweeps a percentage of the state budget over to the ad valorem fund, which is then returned to the counties for property tax reduction. And I think it's good the counties would have the decision for how to decide that locally, but I feel like if we're going to have rules and regulations, we need to follow them. And I hear from seniors all the time. They're really concerned about being able to stay in their homes. And I know many in the state, think, oh, Johnson County, everybody's rich there, and we all live in mansions. Well, we don't, and we should have, for those who've planned, this is where I want to be near my grandkids, near whatever, hospital resources, we should be able to stay in our homes. So I hope that could help out. I do also hear about the taxes on Social Security. Right now, $75,000 earnings in Social Security is that cliff for taxation. And I'd like to see us look at raising that cliff and perhaps indexing to match the raises in Social Security that citizens get. And then the food sales tax, I'm thrilled to hear that Mr. Roitz agrees with getting rid of that entirely. As many of you know, it could have been gone July 1st, so that'd be 6.5% off your groceries since July. But instead, politics held it over to January 1st and to stepping it in. And I don't like to play politics to start with, and I really don't like to play politics with your dollars. Thank you.
Right, the next question, you'll go first, Linda. What are your views on K through 12 education funding and accessibility?
I do support the court order that has required the schools to be fully funded. If we hadn't had the drastic cuts in the previous administration, we never would have had to gone to court, and actually our funding would have been okay if we had just stayed the course. That's not what happened, so now we need to make it up. And I really appreciate that we've had greater information given to us about special ed funding. So the districts I represent, Shawnee Mission, Olathe, and Blue Valley. Shawnee Mission loses $8 million a year by not fully funding. Olathe loses $13 million, and Blue Valley loses $9 million each year. So that's money that's swept from the budget over to special education. So of course we need to fund special education, but it's just another way we're not fully funding education by sweeping it. Again, these are guidelines the legislature set up and has chosen not to meet. So when we had the chance for 22 minutes, I did vote for special ed funding until people came back from their free lunch and realized what had happened and started arm twisting. And that's really disappointing to me, and I've said on many doorsteps, if I had flipped my vote on special ed funding, I would not be standing on any person's doorstep. I also do support increasing support for our colleges. We've seen from the time I entered college to when my children entered college, the cost of college went up 7 times. So we need to look at how we can be competitive with other states. When my kids graduated from high school, a lot of their classmates could go to other states to college cheaper. And we know that kids tend to stay within a radius of the college they attend. So the brain drain is happening on their way to college and then out of college. I'm really hopeful with Panasonic deal that's going to be a pipeline from our university straight to good paying jobs right here in and around Johnson County. So I'm really encouraged by that, and I'm encouraged by the economic development we've had to keep our schools strong.
Ed?
Pretty much as I had said in my opening comments on school funding, they are fully funded. Special education is lacking. I would urge consideration of the school districts to help close the gap out of the multi-million-dollar reserves that they have. But also, again, it's not a question of how much money is being spent, it's where it's being spent, how it's being spent. It's been disturbing in recent years, the low percentage of 10th grade kids in English and mathematics that are college ready and on track for college. And a majority of our children are not college ready in the 3 school districts that we represent. In the 2021 statistics, which are the latest available, and this is from the Kansas Department of Education and official government sources, Blue Valley on math, 44.3, Olathe 27.7, and Shawnee Mission 34.3% of the 10th graders are on track for college. And so I think we need to focus on classroom performance of our kids. And you know, the taxpayers have not been ever underburdened with supporting our schools, and they do a very good job of that. Property tax, and I'll touch on that later on, how it's been going up way above the rate of inflation and population growth here in our county. So, thank you.
All right, Ed, you'll start off this next question. What types of economic development policies do you support to encourage job growth and business expansion in Kansas?
Kansas must strive to be competitive, not just regionally, not just against our neighbors and in the entire country, but also worldwide. The recent Apex project that was awarded to Kansas, the Panasonic plant, was a success. And I think that we should develop further plans, not just for the supporting industries of Panasonic, because that's an existing policy, but also develop some, what I would call mini Apex for the, instead of $1 billion project, maybe a $250 million or $500 million projects. I also believe firmly that existing business and industry here in Kansas should always be eligible for any programs that we have. and that we could probably do a better job of attracting basic fundamental industry if there was a little bit more scrutiny on the incentives to a lot of the building that's going on here in Johnson County, and I refer to the apartments. Multi-million dollars in incentives are given to them, and there's a lot of businesses, small business, medium-sized, and even some large business that have no incentives available to them, and yet out-of-town developers come in and at the drop of a hat receive very lucrative incentives.
Wanda? Do you want me to read the question?
No, it's okay, I have it here. I do think the best economic policy we can come up with is to maintain a stable budget. Companies don't want to come to states that don't have quality schools, that are bleeding money left and right, having to cut social services. Families want hospitals. Families want doctors, like your regular family physicians. They want quality schools. They want arts opportunities for their kids. They want services for their families. So I think we need to keep our budget and our economy strong by continuing to be responsible. I do support the Apex deal and am excited for what it's going to bring. Apex was formed because we didn't have packages of that size. So we already have packages for smaller, which are still pretty big to me as a one-person business, but we have packages or guidelines available for smaller packages already. I am pleased that the STAR bonds the state gives out are now going to have further scrutiny to make sure taxpayers are getting what they've paid for with STAR bonds and with development. As far as apartments and housing, I hear from when I've been on the rural tours to here in the urban that affordable or workforce housing is needed. Our teachers do need somewhere to live, our firefighters, our policemen, they need somewhere to live, and that would be workforce housing. Here at Overland Park, when we started, we had 40% apartments, and today we have 40% apartments. So some of it, we might feel like we have apartments everywhere, but we're in the same percentage. That was brought out as an issue in the mayor's race. So I think the local incentives that are given to apartments and affordable housing, that's a local issue. I am glad on the state level that we are putting more investment and research into getting affordable housing for our workforce.
All right. Linda, the next question will go to you first. What would you do to grow and develop the state's workforce?
I think the foundation of our workforce is our schools. So it attracts in businesses when we know we have quality schools. I know when families come here to Johnson County, they have a choice. If they want to stay right at 16, they can choose between 3 school districts. And I know families do research those schools. If you look up on any listing, it'll tell you what schools, you can click on to see how those schools rated, comments about the schools. So I know schools are the foundation of getting families to want to move here. They're also the foundation of educating our workforce. We hear from our employers that our kids are coming out of K through 12 education and college education very well educated in their field, but they're missing some soft skills. And there's some debate, is it the school's role to be teaching kids how to answer emails and get along with others and function in society, or is it only their job to educate? But I feel like these are things we can do at the same time. We can teach kids how to get along with each other, respect each other, work together. At the same time, we're making them experts in their fields. We're so lucky to have Johnson County Community College in the district because it does give everybody some level of option once they finish K-12 school. So if you want to go on to a technical career, which I think is great and has so many opportunities and would be such a big, big plus in our current economy to go to technical school, it's right there at the community college. Community college is also an excellent investment that you can send your kids there for the first 2 years. For me, it was 1/3 the cost per hour of what it cost when my kids were at Kansas State, one of our four-year schools. So, you know, families have those choices. If economics are something they really want to focus on first, you could go to the community college and get a high-quality education to start college at a cheaper rate, and then move on to one of our four-year schools if that's where you want to be. But I think schools are the foundation of our economy.
Ed?
Education is certainly a key to our growth, and it's also preparing the next generation of workers. I use a couple of examples of current programs in the Blue Valley School District, the internship program with Black and Veatch, for example. In Olathe, the 21st century programs that give students a firsthand experience in STEM programs, science, technology, mathematics, etc. As has been mentioned, we're really fortunate to have probably the flagship community college in the state in the Kansas network here at Johnson County Junior College, Community College. There's a lot of kids that aren't interested in going to a four-year college, or they want to work with their hands. They want to gain a skill, a trade. And I think it's an excellent source of programs, HVAC, plumbing, welding, CDL driving, culinary arts, et cetera, et cetera. And it's right here down the street. Fortunately, the cost of a four-year university really everywhere, but also especially in Kansas, has went up way higher than what the inflation rate in recent years has dictated. And the junior colleges, the community colleges, are an excellent alternative to that, where they can get a much better value for the dollar spent educating our young.
Great, thank you. The next question will go to you.
Okay.
What are your views on the state's role with respect to ensuring access and affordability of post-secondary education?
Well, again, access to post-secondary education, you know, we have a fine region system, but it's the cost. We have a lot of, I forget the exact percentage, but we have a lot of our freshman kids that don't get past freshman year. And I tend to favor the community colleges. Unfortunately, community colleges and even the Regents institutions have a very high rate of remedial programs that are blocking and slowing down education for our young people. And that kind of goes back and reflects on our high schools. If they're turning out graduates that can't read at certain levels and you know, other skills that they need to begin college, then we've got problems, as we know, with our children gaining a good graduate education in our high schools.
Linda?
I do think one of the best ways we ensure access to community colleges and higher education is by the state choosing to invest in colleges. We have seen in the past drastic cuts in what was spent to help students go to college, to support our colleges. We've also seen drastic cuts in the maintenance funds for our colleges. And I can tell you, when kids go to tour college and they see tarps over lockers and things, they're not that excited to go somewhere with a leaky roof, although my kids still chose that college that had leaky roofs. So I think the state needs to be responsible in its stewardship of the buildings of our university and how we choose to invest our funds. There's money for all kinds of things. There could also be money for our colleges to keep tuition affordable for families. I do think the community college is a great option. We're really lucky to have that. And you know, we have trade schools through the unions that are just amazing to visit. I went and visited pipe fitters last year, and I see their math class up on the board, and they're doing trigonometry and higher learning that suits them better on a hands-on environment. I think we consistently hear that our kids leave K through 12 education in great shape to succeed in not only our Kansas schools, but other out-of-state schools. I'd like to see them stay in Kansas, but our kids are leaving K through 12 education well educated. And for those who might have a little blip on the radar, I'm thankful that our colleges are able to support them to being on par. I don't think anybody is being held back when we choose to help those who might have, say, an undiagnosed reading disorder. If we only find it in college, well then great. I'm glad we found it. I'm glad we can help those kids. It doesn't hurt the other kids to help those.
Right, the next question will go to you first, Linda. What do you believe the takeaways for state lawmakers should be from the COVID-19 pandemic experience?
Well, I have to say first that I am the wife of an emergency physician. So we saw COVID-19 upfront and personal every day of the pandemic, and we continue to see it upfront and personal every day of the pandemic. I can't forget that we have 9,000 Kansans that are dead because of COVID. So that really weighs on me heavily. I think we've learned that science is real and we should not politicize it. Even during this session, we saw attempts to politicize science by the legislature trying to enact statewide health regulations that went against science. I think we need to leave those decisions to health professionals. I do think we might have learned that health guidelines are more effective on the local level than on the state level, and whether that's a plus or a minus, I think that's probably just a fact of life. And that's something we can learn from. I certainly am thankful that the governor put keeping kids safe and keeping teachers safe first when the pandemic hit. Obviously, there were a lot of things we didn't know then that we know now. I just heard on someone's doorstep Monday night, thank goodness the governor kept us safe, because I, as a teacher, and she was, nearing retirement age teacher, she was concerned for her own safety. So I'm glad we put safety first. I'm glad that we have vaccines now for those who choose to get them, that we have the availability of high quality masks for those who choose to use them, so that families have options to get their kids back to school in person, and that everybody can get back to work in person.
Ed?
Well, I think we've learned a lot of valuable lessons having gone through COVID period and the pandemic. We're seeing some of the judgments being made on the quote-unquote science that was promulgated by the CDC and the federal government. But I think one of the bottom lines is we saw that the shutdowns, they're bad for children, bad as students in the schools, and they're bad for business. I think that in the future, of course we have no idea exactly what's going to happen in the future, but I think that there should be no more one size fits all. After all, we're looking at the entire state of Kansas, very diverse, very spread out geographically and population-wise. Would also say that the next time if we ever get into a situation like this, that the churches should be left to decide if they are essential or not. They were shut down, as well as just about everything, the whole economy, and I think it boils down to individual liberty and basic freedoms that were denied a lot of Americans and a lot of Kansans. Thank you.
Okay, Ed, you'll get this question first. What are your views on healthcare policy and Medicaid expansion?
Well, in regards to Medicaid expansion, number one, I think we need to be very, very, very careful in considering expansion, especially with the looming recession that's right around the corner. And how much can the state afford, and what will the federal government do if they change their minds and restrict restrict reimbursement through the program. I think we need to be very careful about increasing the eligibility to Medicaid by however many people it would be, depending on the requirements that's set down, without providing for corresponding amount of doctors and healthcare providers. Because if we don't do that, it just restricts further the access to the Medicaid patients. In other words, you've got many more Medicaid patients wanting care and services with fewer medical officials there to provide it. So it makes it harder, wait times will be longer, and other than that, thank you.
Linda?
I have been a long time supporter of Medicaid expansion. When I first started helping now Senator Holscher with her run for this seat, Medicaid expansion was a founding principle. When I decided to run for office, the 150,000 Kansans we see that are working yet still can't afford insurance were certainly on my mind when I made that decision to run. Things I think we need to consider is the state has given away nearly $6 billion of your tax dollars to the federal government that has gone to other states. So that'd be every state around us and many, many, many others. So that's your tax dollars going to other states. And if you want to fund healthcare in other states, I think that's great. Let's do it through charitable donations, not through our tax dollars. Let's get our tax dollars back to Kansas. Here in Johnson County, we have nearly 8,000 working uninsured people. So these are not people sitting home collecting benefits and doing nothing. These are people going to work every day that can't afford. So that would be our service workers. If you're tired of going to a restaurant and they can't be fully open, these are the workers we're talking about. We're talking about our hands-on healthcare providers, like for our elderly, those home health providers, some of our mental health providers on the more direct care access. Those are the workers we're supporting. That helps our workforce to give them insurance, because then they're not going to go across the state line. As far as access to care, people are going to seek health care when they need help. If they have insurance, they could go to more efficient means of providers, so it would be our family practice and general practitioners. When they don't have access to health insurance, they go to the emergency room, that's where my husband works, and care there is excellent, however, incredibly expensive. It is the least financially efficient means of caring for people, and we are paying for that as taxpayers. So I'd rather see us pay for it with the taxes we're already paying rather than additional funds.
Right, the next question is kind of lengthy, so if either of you want me to repeat it, just let me know. So this will go to you first, Linda. How control over decision-making is divided among state legislature and local governments, including school boards, on issues such as taxation, economic development, and education has been a matter of debate. What are your views on this issue?
I do serve on the local government committee and the education committee in Topeka, so I have really learned a lot about local control, and I think it's a good thing. Johnson County is quite different from many, many parts of the state. Those parts of the state have a lot more representatives than we do and a bigger voice in Topeka. So I think local control is the way to go. We elect school board members. On the local level, we elect state school board members. We have representation closer to the voter on the city and the county level. So I think the state needs to consistently stick with local control. That is, how we run things. I think we need to consider that. As far as schools directly, as you know, the state allocates the money and then local schools decide how to spend it. And again, we have different needs even within the 3 districts in House District 16 from district to district, and parents have closest access to their local school board as opposed to the state legislature. We're pretty close as representatives, but we still have 23,000 people we're responsible for. So when you split that down into the school districts, that's where voters, parents, and families have the closest and most direct impact on voicing how they would like those dollars spent.
I too believe that local control and governments closest to those that they serve is best. School boards, city councils, county commissions, boards like that. There is some concern though about federal funding, for example, is just an example, to our schools and all the requirements that come along with that. And basically it can neutralize the impact or the effect of our local representation, because the feds dictate what's being taught in the schools and in the manner that it's being taught oftentimes. And I think a lot of parents through COVID now realize what their kids were being taught, and they've shown a lot of concern. They're getting a lot more active in what's being discussed at the school district level, school board level. And I think that's a very positive thing. You can't get any better than having parental participation. They're central to a lot of what should be done with their children, especially through education. So that's what I believe the goal should be with local control whenever possible. And that's it.
All right, thank you. All right, this is going to be the last question. Ed, you'll go first. What do you believe most distinguishes you from your opponent in the race?
I think that my years of experience in both public service, elected office, and being a small businessman, running our family business, I think has served me well. I've met payroll for a lot of years, had a lot of employees that relied on our companies for their livelihood. I served in the Kansas Senate previously in an era when compromise wasn't a dirty word, and that we tried to come to an agreement and something that would serve our constituencies better and to serve the state better. And I hope that we can return to that kind of philosophy and be willing to find, and as a representative of the 16th district, I look forward to working with the other party, reaching across the aisle and trying to achieve that. My opponent, in 2021, I have to point out that she voted with the House Democratic Party votes over 97% of the time. And last year she voted with the House Democrats nearly 94% of the time. So, so much for reaching across the aisle. I think that our district, the 16th district here in Overland Park, deserves better representation, and the ability to listen that I have and try to deliver for my constituencies here in the 16th district will make a difference.
Thank you, Ed. Linda?
Well, I guess it's hard to say always what separates my opponent and I. We're both small business owners. My business is one person, his were more, so that is true. The boards I sit on, I am the treasurer for one that manages a $50,000 budget every year, and I've treasured that for over a decade. And I will say we have record surpluses in that group because I'm very financially conservative in things. As far as voting with the House Democrats, I think anybody could look at the voting tally from these last 2 years and find, I would say 90% would be a very conservative estimate of how many bills pass the House with 100 or more people supporting it. So that's pretty bipartisan. my healthcare worker bill. I could have submitted as a committee bill, but I purposely chose to make it a bill where representatives sign on so that I could go from one Democrat to one Republican to one Democrat to one Republican. It was a great opportunity to get to meet some of my colleagues across the aisle and to show that we could work together. And I'll say one of those colleagues, he and I both had domestic violence bills, and we had quite a good chat about how we could push this forward together in the future. Both of those bills also gave me a great opportunity to work with law enforcement and to really gain the trust and insight from law enforcement. So I think that was great. I do sit on the back row of Democrats, so my seatmates right behind me are Republicans, and my love of sports is a great thing. I have my best Royals friend in the legislature and my best K-State friend, and when one of my childhood friends texts me and says, what do you know about Representative so-and-so, I can say he sits right behind me, and he had a bill sponsored that my friend was interested in, so I could talk directly to him, and I can easily talk to those around me.
All right, thank you. So that concludes the questions. We're going to conclude this with a 1-minute closing statement by each of you. And since Ed went first to open the session, Linda, you will go first with your 1-minute closing statement.
Okay. Thanks again to the Public Policy Council for sponsoring us today, to Mr. Roitz for coming, and for those of you who are here in person and online. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak directly to voters. You know, you can only hit so many people home at one time when you're knocking doors, but I think this is great that everybody has the opportunity to view this later. I ran for office in 2020 because it was the right thing to do. I certainly never had any goals to be a politician. I am a piano teacher. That is my first love. But I can't tell you what an honor and how humbling it is to have people call you, email you, and say, can you help me? And to be able to say, yes, I can. Even if it's not directly my office, I know what office to go to, or I have a network of people that can help me find that office. And really, that's all I've ever wanted to do with my life, is to help others and make things better. So I thank the voters for supporting me in 2020, and I look forward to continuing to serve in the next term.
Ed?
Thank you. I would just say in closing, it's been a big honor for me to have received the nomination and to run here in the 16th District in Overland Park. I too believe in constituent services. That's one of the biggest roles of a state representative in the legislature, to field questions, field requests for assistance, and know where to go looking for the appropriate state agency or personnel to help the constituent. It's been really, really good to walk the district. Virtually every street that I've walked down and knocked on doors, and it's been, I'm very grateful for that opportunity. I look forward to completing the campaign, and hopefully if the voters have placed the confidence in me to elect me to this role, I would be very humbly ready to, with my experience, to accept the election and to serve the people.
Thank you. So I want to thank both of you for participating in this forum, and also both of you for your willingness to step up to the plate and serve the people of the state of Kansas and Johnson County. So would everyone join in giving them a round of applause? Right, I just have a couple of administrative announcements. First of all, there is a recording of today's forum, and along with other election-related information, those recordings will be available on www.votejoco.com. And I also want to remind you that advanced voting in person begins on Saturday, October 22nd, and Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. Please go out and vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you.